Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is a joint presentation between Okta and TechJutsu. In terms of introductions, I'm going to hand things over to Mike, who can talk a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm Mike Berthold. I work as a principal solutions architect here at Okta. I'm based in Montreal. I've been working on identity for over 20 years. I also happen to act as a team lead for our identity architects pre-sales team as part of our Office of Field CTO. And I've been, on this side of the table for well over 12 years and doing identity for over 20. And, pleasure to be part of this today with our partners at TechJutsu. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Then there's me, Peter Steller. I am an identity and access management specialist at TechJutsu. I've been working in IAM since 2005. I don't feel old enough to say I've been doing this for 20 years, but the math kind of checks out. When I'm not working, I'm a dad to two boys. In the fall and winter, I volunteer as a scouter with Scouts Canada, but in the spring and summer, I coach baseball. But my day job, talking identity and access management. Let's talk about today's agenda. Mike is going to tackle the first few topics. He's going to talk about the new challenges inherent with AI agents and drill down into the 3 layers of AI security. After that, I will talk about some current examples of help desk breaches, the 4 pillars of trusted AI support, and show a quick demo of our ServiceNow virtual agent integration. We'll discuss some business outcomes that come from verification and securing your AI agents, and then we will open up the floor for some Q&A. All right, Mike, if you want to take over the presentation, all yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up here. And so, yes, we are going to be talking about AI agents because really, when we're talking agentic, we're talking unpredictable, right? They're non-deterministic. And so the problem with them, as we all know, that having used them so often recently, is that you will get different responses to the exact same prompt. And this is just an example, should I approve this vendor contract? And you can run it 3 times and you get a yes, maybe, and no throughout the 3 times. And so that's normal because the very power of their creativity is that they're non-deterministic and randomized to a certain extent. And so anytime you start thinking about security, you have to start thinking about how can we secure when you have a non-deterministic system, right? And this is nothing that we haven't seen before, but it's kind of in a different way and scale. And so I'm just going to go quickly here just to show you just what we're talking about in terms of scale. Because we've dealt with non-human identities before, maybe not agentic specifically, but I would argue that non-deterministic has kind of been a feature of non-human identities for a very long time. Just think about service accounts and how at times they may do or execute things that we weren't prepared for them to do, just in terms of maybe bugs or flaws in the code, or thinking about not necessarily the wrong use, but maybe the incorrect use of these credentials in different ways. You think about service accounts that were set up to do task A, and somebody says, well, that has the capabilities to do things beyond what was coded for. And especially when we think about service accounts in the old days, we felt confident, well, the code will protect us. We'll write the code to make sure that we scope it appropriately, right? We'll scope the permissions within the tool, not within the identity, which wasn't really acceptable. And we actually saw what that could lead to, things like misconfigurations causing breaches, things like the misuse of those credentials. But it was kind of a cost of doing business approach, especially because it was so difficult to tie in exactly what you need to scope to. Well, when you come to today, if we're using those same credentials for agentic, that's a huge problem. And so this gives you kind of an example of what would it look like in a typical setup with an organization that maybe only has 58 odd tools across 5 servers, leveraging things like external MCPs and SaaS services, third-party agents, their own internal MCPs, a bunch of A2A agents across 10,000 users, each user doing around 10 tasks a day, upwards of 1,000 agents across the organization, each of the agents having upwards of those 58 tools that we're able to access. So we start talking about billions of access decisions in one day. And so while the specific requirements around protecting these identities and protecting these accesses and scoping appropriately aren't really new, the scale has become quite different. We used to talk, as a kind of a guidepost, 20 to 1 in terms of non-human identities to human identities. And now we're talking 50 to 100 to 1. Actually, I just saw a study which said about 140 to 1 is the new normal. And that's just showing you the explosion in terms of non-human identities being powered by our turn towards agentic. And we're talking about maybe 1,000 to 1 5 years down the line, 10,000 to 1 beyond that. So we're not only are we talking about a great increase in number of accounts that we need to deal with and all of these non-human identities, it's only going to get worse as time goes on. And so we really need to have foundational security. What does that mean? Well, as I mentioned, security doesn't stop at the model layer. We've tried to bake security in at the tool layer, even before agentic, as I mentioned, talking about just regular service accounts being used for non-human or non-interactive purposes. Now with agentic, there's a lot more of that capability to go off script, if you will. And so when you try to bake security into the model layer, whether it's through prompt sanitization or other means, what ends up happening is because they're non-deterministic and they're designed to basically push the boundaries, if you will, of what they're able to do, they will inevitably find holes if your security model is internal to your agentic platform. And this is where we really need to start scoping those permissions appropriately. And especially when you start thinking about the use cases, we're talking about a lot of these agents being used by individuals or on behalf of individuals to execute certain work, which is great, right? If I want to search through my company documentation, I probably don't want to do that manually. That's hours of work to, needle of a haystack kind of thing. So I would love to use an agent to go through all of our company data and identify what I need to work on for a specific customer, for instance. Well, that's great, but then that AI agent better be scoped according to my capabilities. And not only that, I should be giving it specifically what it needs to do to accomplish its work and not more. So it's not a question of just cloning me and having all my permissions, because I have a lot of permissions that agentic could make, misuse of accidentally, right? And just in terms of, not executing what I expect it to execute, or maliciously if it happens to then get, let's say hijacked by a different process. And so obviously we need to protect the agentic uses from being hijacked, but it's still something I need to worry about because unfortunately I'm a human. And so I may authorize my agent to be used by a nefarious actor. And so all of that, when you start thinking about all of the different means that these, legitimate accesses can be misused, and again, it doesn't have to be malicious, but definitely misuses where we don't expect it to be used for what it's being used for. This is where you start seeing the power of having a security right at the identity layer, where we're able to scope it. And so the agent just isn't capable of going beyond because it just doesn't have the access. And so if I go and I start searching for customer data, it does use my permissions and it's only looking at that repository or those repositories it has access to. It's not leveraging my accesses to start digging through things it shouldn't normally access, or I'm not giving it direct authorization access. And so really it is about kind of building those guardrails external. I'm going to give an example, and not to pick on anybody, but Meta actually had this big story come out a couple of weeks ago where they had a chatbot where it turned out about 20,000, when we call them privileged VIP kind of Facebook accounts, their credentials were reset by bad actors simply because they were able to fool the chatbot into believing they were those VIPs. And so it shows when they tried, they obviously tried to guardrail the security within the platform, within the chatbot, and it failed to do so. Whereas if they had scoped according to identity, right away there would have been a validation. Hey, are you actually this celebrity that you're pretending to be? Or are you actually able to prove you are that person before I go ahead and reset the credentials and let you into that account? This is what we needed, but that's where you see the breakdown when security is done within the model, within the agentic platform, instead of at the identity layer. That's why identity becomes so key. It really is what makes it foundational for secure agentic AI. When you think about what identity can uncover or help with, you look at shadow IT, right? We've done this before. When we went through cloud, when we went through the SaaS revolution, we saw a lot of shadow IT, people just whipping out a credit card and buying services. And then as cybersecurity professionals, it was incumbent on us to then go ahead and try to start managing that and wrangle all that in. Agentic's the same story. The only issue is now you don't even really need a credit card. Now you can just go ahead and authorize connections, and now you've let Agentic into your environment. And this is where we need to start identifying that utilization and ensure that agents are not bypassing our identity provider entirely. When we think about overprivileged access, and I mentioned this tendency to build more standing access just because it's difficult to request new accesses, right? The tendency to reuse non-human identities because it's arduous to go through the process of requesting a brand new identity for a specific use case. But these are the things that, again, as cybersecurity professionals, we now have the tooling to help address those shortcomings, right? We can make it where it's not as difficult to go ahead and request that access, to do more of a just-in-time model, even for our non-human identities, doing human-in-the-loop validation when an agentic flow needs additional permissions from the original originator, typically the human behind, right? This is where we're getting away from a long-lived access token, which can be misused, which even can be hijacked, and we're going to short-lived access tokens and potentially long-lived refresh tokens with a proper custom token exchange model, where we're not, again, just going to mint an access token that looks exactly like the one for me, the human, when I'm delegating some of my tasks to an agentic flow. I'm only going to scope down specific permissions, and that will be within the access, the custom token that's created for that agentic flow. And so it's really just going to be almost a shard of my identity that agentic flow is going to be able to take advantage of. And you think about that shard of my identity gives context, gives attribution, gives auditability. And so now when we start looking at logs, now we can actually see the traceability. We can see that, yes, it was an agentic use of my accesses, but it was a very scoped, controlled, auditable manner that we can also govern and certify. And so now we have that traceability, we have the auditability, we have the proof that we can send back to our auditors when required to show why these actions were taken, which is something, unfortunately, that is often lacking today. And that is that audit trail that we need. We cannot have untraceable actions within our environment, because as soon as we don't have visibility, we've lost command and control. And that's really what it boils down to, is visibility at the end of the day. How can we secure what we don't know? And the problem with agentic is often we don't have that visibility. And that really is ground zero to having the ability to start tackling this issue. And so it's, what are fundamentally the questions we're trying to answer? Where are our agents? What can they connect to? And what are they capable of doing? What are their capabilities and abilities? And these are the questions every organization has to be able to answer. And we do a lot of polling of our customers. As you can imagine, we have a lot of customers at Okta, and we've gotten the response that roughly half of our customers are relatively comfortable answering these three questions. When we dig, though, and we actually ask follow-ups, inevitably there's always the caveat that they're not 100% sure they have full coverage, right? That there may be gaps. The shadow IT problem is talking about, that shadow AI problem that a lot of organizations are dealing with today, is definitely a thing. But surprisingly, there's half that don't even feel they have that kind of coverage. At, well, at least where they're aware they're using agentic, they can answer these questions. But half of our customers actually struggle to even answer these questions, even on those platforms where they have visibility. And I think that shows just how fast this is moving. And it's not a question of, a lack of will or even lack of capabilities. Often it's lack of time, that there's a breakneck adoption of agentic that's being pushed by our businesses, which is great in terms of, we want to definitely adopt new tooling. But as security professionals, that becomes a bit of a nightmare, because we are trying to get in front of a potentially catastrophic problem if we open up something and we open it up a little bit too wide. And we've seen that in the news media all the time. And again, the Meta example is just one example of where that can cause a lot of reputational damage. But we're also obviously talking about informational leakage and financial damages as well. And so what are you looking for in your identity layer when you're talking about agentic? Well, traditional security tooling is kind of out the window. We really need a modern, zero trust, least privilege approach, along with our proper governance around both human and non-human identity, really bringing non-human identities as first order identities within our platform, attributing them to users, human users, to make sure we have a proper life cycle of their existence, basically, right? The creation, the management, and ultimately the decommissioning of these non-human identities needs to be governed. It needs to be tie to a human responsible. And when that human leaves, we need to tie it to somebody else. That chain of custody will enormously help, because often agentic has been treated a lot like how we've treated non-human identities in the past, or service accounts in the past, which was very different from how we treated a lot of different identities that were human based. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of the same requirements, and even the requirements we thought we didn't really need, things like governance, things like, certifying our accesses, we should have been doing them, and we kind of hand waved it away and said, well, because there's no human behind it, we don't really need to do it. We can do it at kind of an organizational level, and we can do it by class of identities. I've seen that before, especially on the privileged access side. We need to move towards a proper management of identities, whether they're non-human or human, in a very standardized approach. And so that means building where we're going. We've got dozens and hundreds of agents today, and actually now it's thousands in a lot of places, but it's going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, literally millions of agents tomorrow. The infrastructure handling all of that needs to be proven at scale and needs to have those capabilities foundationally today. You also want something that's very vendor neutral, right? You don't want to be locked into a specific ecosystem where you're great if you're using, let's say, Copilot and GitHub. But if you go beyond that, and now all of a sudden you want to start using, Bedrock, or you want to use Google Gemini, you get into problems because your security tooling doesn't really speak their languages or doesn't have the breadth of integration capabilities. Whereas you have identity tooling, which is very agnostic in terms of the toolings that you choose, and is able to work within all of these different ecosystems. And ultimately, all of our customers are leveraging many different agentic platforms, dozens of platforms of many of our customers. And so you need a tool that's going to be able to talk across all of those. And we're really talking about full agent lifecycle, not disjointed point solutions, right? Discovery, registry, authorization, governance, all in one place, all with that breadth. You don't want to standardize on a partial tool when you're talking about identity, and you already have to worry about the interaction between your identity layer, your data layer, your network layer, and have that as a coordinated defense in depth approach, not just siloed approaches all over the place where there's no awareness being shared through things like, standards-based shared signals framework, for instance. So that's what you're looking for. And now I'm going to turn the ball back over to Peter to discuss TechJutsu and how they are putting our technology at work to help with AI security.
Thank you, Mike. Lots of good information there, and homework for everyone to start thinking about if you haven't done so already. The art of the possible is getting more interesting every day. Let's move on to talk a little bit about things that are impacting us today. With Okta's infrastructure to build upon, we at TechJutsu can provide the knowledge and experience to implement solutions. Obviously, everyone's first burning questions are, why are we called TechJutsu, and what does that name mean? In addition to being an IAM expert, our founder and CEO, Tracy Nyholt, also happens to have a black belt. During her studies in Japan, she learned that jutsu means skill in Japanese. So TechJutsu, or technical skill, seemed to fit both what we do and our personalities. We're tech ninjas. No doubt many of you have seen or heard news reports of major IT security breaches as of late. One of the most famous in recent memory was the MGM breach in the fall of 2023. A hacker group called Scattered Spider gained access to MGM's environment through the help desk. Out of the high-profile cases that we're looking at here, though, I want to draw attention to the Clorox breach. The latest news on that one is the $380 million lawsuit that Clorox has filed against their own outsourced IT services provider, claiming that the help desk did not follow basic security protocols, such as properly verifying users before resetting user passwords and granting access. So both in the news and in the boardroom, people are waking up to the fact that the service desk is a known threat vector. People's natural tendency is to want to help others. Hackers are appealing to that by way of social engineering. The help desk is often an organization's weak link for security. Both for that reason and obviously also the ruthless search for efficiency and cost savings, companies are increasingly embracing AI as a service desk tool. You may have noticed that when making phone calls, the first voice you hear on the other end of the phone is often not a human, as AI voice agents are being widely adopted. Here's a scary new example from this month, June 2026. Mike touched on it earlier. In this case, attackers didn't need to exploit code. They just talked to the AI support bot. By instructing Meta's AI chatbot to change the linked email address on an account, hackers were able to gain full control. Some of the victims included Barack Obama's White House Instagram account, the Chief Master Sergeant of Space Force, and Sephora's corporate Instagram account. The attackers aren't just tricking our AI infrastructure, they're building their own. Agents that scrape LinkedIn to identify people in particular roles at specific organizations, AI-based tools to convincingly clone a person's voice, often in real time with only 3 seconds of audio samples, and all being adopted and leveraged faster and with less technical knowledge thanks to AI tooling. Organizations are growing concerned, rightly so. Identity and access management is only as strong as its weakest link. We've seen successful attacks on help desks and service desks in many sectors over the last few years. Banks, healthcare providers, energy, breaches are coming more often and are often more sophisticated than ever before. This was a problem before AI, but it's only becoming more common now. Those seeking to adopt AI as a solution need to be aware that it comes with its own collection of potential risks. Whether a human or an AI identity is pulling the strings, we need to think about security. First, every identity needs to be verified. Second, its access needs to be scoped to only allow what it is authorized to do. And finally, every action needs to be visible and tracked. We want to ensure that AI can cooperate within our environments securely, responsibly, and transparently. To that end, you need to keep these 4 pillars in mind. Agents must verify users before action is taken. Like people, agents should not be given the keys to the kingdom. Governance is important. Limit the scope of access given to those agents. Different operations require different policies. Each operation should be scrutinized before it is authorized. And finally, ensure that the operations, whatever they are being logged. The technology to enable AI to perform basic service desk tasks already exists. The real challenge is trusting the technology to do what you want when you want. This is the key, including identity verification. Without it, the automation of support operations runs the real risk of social engineering attacks at an unprecedented scale. At TechJutsu, we've been working on identity verification for as long as we have been working with Okta. Our Caller Verify platform works with ITSM systems, IVRs, chatbots, and now AI-powered virtual agents. Here's a quick look at how it works within ServiceNow.
It's 8:55 a.m. I have a board meeting in 5 minutes, and I just realized I'm locked out of my account. Usually this is a nightmare. I'd have to call the help desk, wait on hold, answer security questions, and hope I get in before the meeting starts. But today, I'm not calling anyone. Watch this. I click on the ServiceNow virtual agent, and it immediately recognizes I need help. It confirms my email to start the security check. And look at that. It pulled every registered MFA factor I have in Okta. Push, FastPass, even my security key. I'm going to choose the TOTP option for my Galaxy S24. I just open my Authenticator app, type in the 6-digit code, and hit send. Verified instantly. Now that I'm secure, I can actually do what I need to do. I'll ask for a temporary password to get back online right now. There it is, password reset. And the system automatically logged an incident ticket for the audit trail. I'm back in. And just like that, I made my 9 a.m. No stress, no downtime, and 0 calls to the help desk. This is Caller Verify for ServiceNow AI agents, securing ServiceNow's AI with Caller Verify and the MFA tools you already own.
So, with integrated verification using platforms like Caller Verify, you can expect improvements in a variety of areas. Increased security, and with it, a decrease in the risk of social engineering-related breaches. Improved efficiency with users getting the help they need faster, reducing your costs. A better user experience for those users, as well as for your service desk. and an increased trust in your AI agents. So AI is here and becoming more integrated into the work that we do every day. Automation helps to make everyone more efficient, but without trust, it creates a lot of risk. TechJutsu's happy to be partnered with Okta on the frontier of AI-powered support. Together, we're enabling the adoption of these new technologies with increased security and trust. Thank you all for your curiosity about AI and how it is beginning to power service desks.